They bound the rejected wolf with silver, dragged her through the mud while the pack watched in silence, and hurled her into the freezing, raging river to die, certain she was nothing more than a curse, an unwanted mistake, a life unworthy of mercy. Never imagining that the girl they cast away was the only one in existence whose hidden gift could save the Lycan King himself, restore a collapsing realm, and rewrite the fate of every wolf who had ever been rejected. They did not kill her because she was weak. They killed her because she was different. The moon hung full and merciless above the clearing, its pale light washing over the gathered wolves like a silent judge. Torches burned along the edges of the stone circle, their flames crackling in the cold night air, but no warmth reached her skin. She stood at the center, wrists bound behind her back with silver-laced rope, bare feet sinking into damp earth that still smelled of rain and ash. Every eye was on her, some hard with disgust, some sharp with fear, others carefully blank. This was her pack, the only family she had ever known. And tonight, they had decided she was no longer worth keeping alive. She lifted her chin, though her knees trembled. She refused to bow. Not now. Not in front of them. The Alpha stood before her, tall and broad, his presence filling the clearing with suffocating dominance. His eyes, once warm when she was a child, were cold now, carved from stone. At his side stood the elders, their silver hair braided with bones and charms, their expressions grave and self-righteous. By the laws of the pack, the Alpha announced, his voice carrying easily through the night, "This wolf stands accused of bringing misfortune upon us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She swallowed hard. Misfortune? They blamed her for the failed hunts, for the sick pups, for the moonless nights when their shifts went wrong. They blamed her for everything they could not explain. "She carries no strength," one elder continued. "No rank, no mate, no visible gift." Another stepped forward, eyes sharp as knives. "Worse than that, she disrupts the balance." The moon does not answer her. The words struck deeper than any blade. She had known this was coming, ever since her wolf failed to awaken like the others. Ever since her 18th birthday passed without ceremony, without recognition, without the warmth of the moon's blessing. Still, hearing it spoken aloud, declared as truth, hurt more than she was prepared for. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I've served the pack. I've followed every command." "You've failed every test," the Alpha replied coldly. Her gaze flicked to the crowd, searching for a single familiar face. Someone who would remember the nights she stood watch when others slept. The hunts where she took the dangerous flank positions. The pups she carried when their mothers were injured. No one stepped forward. Shame burned hotter than fear. The punishment for such a wolf, the Alpha continued, would traditionally be death. Her heart clenched, but she did not beg. She would not give them that. However, an elder said, raising a gnarled hand, "We have decided she is unworthy of a warrior's end." A few wolves nodded in grim approval. "She will be cast out," the Alpha said. "Return to the elements. If fate deems her worthy of survival, she may live. If not, her death will not stain our hands." A lie. They all knew it. Two enforcers grabbed her arms, hauling her forward as the crowd parted. Her feet stumbled against the earth, stones cutting into her skin, but she bit back a cry. She would not scream for them. The river lay beyond the trees. She could hear it long before she saw it. Rushing, swollen from recent storms, violent and unforgiving. The smell of cold water and moss filled the air as they dragged her to the edge of the bank. The moonlight glinted off the silver threads woven through the rope binding her wrists. Silver. They wanted to be certain. Her breath came fast now, chest tight as panic clawed its way up her throat. She tried to pull back, instinct screaming, but the silver burned her skin, stealing her strength with every movement. The alpha stopped a few paces away, watching her as if she were already dead. "May the moon judge you," he said. She met his gaze, something fierce and unbroken flaring in her chest despite everything. "The moon already has," she replied quietly. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his face. Then it was gone. They shoved her forward. The cold hit her like a living thing, stealing her breath before she could scream. The river swallowed her whole, the current ripping her from the bank with brutal force. Water filled her mouth, her nose, her lungs, choking and merciless. Pain exploded everywhere at once. The ropes dragged her down, heavy and relentless. Silver burned against her wrists and ankles, leaching warmth from her blood, weakening her limbs as the river slammed her against hidden rocks. She thrashed, instinct fighting even as her strength drained away. "I won't die like this." Her thoughts fractured, memories flashing through her mind, running as a child beneath the trees, laughing with pups who had turned their backs on her tonight, gazing up at the moon and wondering why it never spoke to her. Was she truly nothing? The current pulled her under again, darker this time, colder. Her limbs grew heavy. Her vision blurred. The roar of the river became distant, muffled, as if she were sinking into another world. So this was how rejected wolves vanished. No grave. No name spoken again. Just silence. Her chest burned as her body demanded air she could not reach. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, thick and inevitable. And in that darkness, something stirred. A faint warmth bloomed deep within her chest, weak at first, then pulsing stronger with every faltering heartbeat. It did not feel like magic she recognized, nor like the power the pack worshipped. It felt older. The river shifted around her, its crushing grip easing just enough for her body to convulse, clinging to life by sheer will. She did not know it yet. But far away, beneath a different moon, a Lycan King was falling to his knees. And the gift he needed had just been cast into the river to die. The river was meant to be her grave. It roared like a living thing, swollen by recent storms, dark and merciless beneath the moonless sky. The moment her bound body struck the water, pain exploded through her, cold so sharp it stole her breath, silver biting into her skin like fire. The ropes burned where they cut into her wrists and ankles, heavy with the pack's cruel intent. She sank. Water rushed into her mouth, her nose, her lungs, dragging a scream from her throat that dissolved into bubbles and darkness. The current seized her like an executioner's hand, slamming her against unseen rocks, spinning her until the world became a blur of black and silver pain. This was how they wanted it to end. Tied. Helpless. Forgotten. Her thoughts fractured as the river pulled her under again. Faces flashed behind her closed eyes, wolves who had once shared meals with her, who had laughed beside the fire, who had turned away as she was dragged through the mud. The alpha's cold stare. The elder's judgment. The words that had shattered her world. Useless. Cursed. Unworthy of the pack. Her chest burned. Her vision dimmed at the edges. So this is it, she thought distantly. This is how rejected wolves disappear. The river twisted, dragging her deeper, crushing the last of her strength. Her limbs grew heavy, numb. The silver ropes leached warmth from her blood, sapping what little resistance she had left. Darkness crept in. And then, something answered. It began as a pulse. Not pain, not fear. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through her bones, deep and ancient, as if the river itself had exhaled and found her wanting. The water around her shifted, not violently, but deliberately. The current that had been dragging her down suddenly loosened, spiraling in a way that felt controlled. Her eyes flew open beneath the water. For a heartbeat, the river glowed. Faint lines of pale silver-blue light traced the flow around her body, curling like living threads. The ropes around her wrists heated, not burning this time, but cracking, weakening. She gasped as the pressure around her chest eased just enough for her body to convulse, fighting for air. No, a voice whispered, not from outside, but from within her. Not yet. The river surged again, but this time it carried her upward. She broke the surface with a choking gasp, lungs screaming as she sucked in cold night air. The current hurled her forward, battering her against rocks, tearing at her skin, but she clung to consciousness with a desperation she had never known. Her hands twisted violently, muscles straining. The rope snapped. Silver shards scattered into the water, dissolving like ash. She didn't have the strength to question it. She let the river take her, her body limp now, consciousness flickering like a dying flame. The last thing she felt was the current gentling, guiding her rather than killing her, as if an unseen force had decided she was not finished. She woke to pain. Not the sharp agony of silver or the suffocating grip of water, but the deep, aching throb of a body pushed far beyond its limits. Her lashes fluttered as she coughed, river water spilling from her mouth, her chest heaving violently. Cold stone pressed against her cheek. She lay half-curled on a muddy riverbank, tangled in wet reeds and broken branches. Dawn painted the sky in muted shades of gray and pale gold, the storm having passed sometime in the night. The river flowed on before her, deceptively calm now, as if it had not just tried to claim her life. Her wrists were raw, her ankles bruised. Every muscle screamed in protest as she shifted, but she was alive. Alive. A hysterical sound bubbled up in her throat, half laugh, half sob. She pressed her face into the damp earth, shaking as the reality of it crashed over her. They had tried to kill her, and failed. Slowly, she pushed herself upright, swaying as dizziness washed over her. Her dress was torn, clinging to her in tatters. Her skin bore angry red marks where the silver had burned, but beneath the pain, something else lingered. A warmth. Faint, but undeniable. It pulsed beneath her skin in time with her heartbeat, stronger than fear, stronger than despair. She frowned, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. What? Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. She didn't have answers. Only the certainty that the river had not spared her by chance. A sudden breeze stirred the reeds. She froze. Instinct flared, sharp and electric, racing through her nerves. She turned slowly, scanning the unfamiliar forest beyond the riverbank. These were not her pack's lands. The scents were wrong. Strange, neutral, untouched by the dominance markers she had grown up beneath. She was alone. For the first time in her life, truly alone. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, something inside her steadied. She forced herself to stand, legs trembling, and took a cautious step away from the water. As she did, her sleeve slipped back, revealing faint markings along her forearm, thin, almost invisible lines that glimmered softly before fading. Her breath caught. She had never borne marks before. No pack bond. No blessing. Nothing the elders had ever acknowledged. Yet now, a distant ache bloomed in her chest, sudden, sharp, and not her own. She staggered, clutching at herself as an image flashed behind her eyes. A vast stone hall, black banners, and a towering figure brought to one knee, his breath ragged, his power flickering like a dying flame. A crown of silver and shadow. A king. Her heart slammed painfully, the warmth inside her flaring in response. Somewhere far away, a Lycan King was suffering, and somehow, impossibly, she felt it. The sensation faded as quickly as it came, leaving her shaken and breathless. She sank back to the ground, staring at her hands as if they no longer belonged to her. "What am I?" she whispered. The river whispered back, its surface rippling softly. She didn't understand it yet, but the truth had already begun to take shape in the silence between her heartbeats. The pack had cast her away to die. But fate had other plans. The river had not been her end. It had been her awakening. Chapter 3: The Gift She Never Knew She Carried. She woke with the taste of river silt still on her tongue and a pain so deep it felt carved into her bones. For a long moment, she didn't move. She lay half-curled on damp earth, the scent of moss and wet leaves heavy in the air. Above her, branches tangled together, filtering the morning light into pale ribbons that shifted with the breeze. Somewhere nearby, water flowed, calmer now, quieter, as if the river that had tried to kill her had already lost interest. Slowly, carefully, she drew in a breath. It hurt, but it didn't burn. That alone was enough to send a tremor through her body. She was alive. Her fingers twitched first, then her toes. Pain flared sharply along her wrists and ankles where the silver ropes had cut and burned, but when she lifted her hands into view, she froze. The wounds were closing. Not healed, not yet. But no longer raw and bleeding. The angry red burns had dulled to faint silver-pink scars, as if days had passed instead of hours. Her breath hitched as she pushed herself up onto her elbows, then into a sitting position, dizziness washing over her in waves. "That's not possible," she whispered. Silver burns didn't fade. They festered. Everyone knew that. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, expecting the familiar hollowness that had haunted her all her life. Instead, she felt it again. That warmth. Faint, steady, pulsing beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Fear crept in. She scrambled back instinctively until her shoulders hit the trunk of a fallen tree. Her breath came fast as she scanned her surroundings. The forest was unfamiliar, thick with ancient growth and heavy with neutral scents, no pack markings, no dominance pressing down on her senses. She was far from home. The realization settled uneasily in her chest. They really meant for me to disappear, she thought. A soft crunch of leaves sounded nearby. Her head snapped up. "Who's there?" Her voice was hoarse, but she forced it louder, sharper. A figure emerged slowly from between the trees. He was a wolf, but not like those of her pack. His hair was silver-streaked despite his youth, tied loosely at his neck. His clothes were worn but well cared for, leather patched and mended, a traveler's gear. His eyes, strange, pale gray, assessed her with careful calm rather than suspicion. "A survivor," he said after a moment. "Didn't expect to find one of those washed up here." She tensed, instinct flaring despite her exhaustion. "Stay back." He raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Easy. If I meant you harm, you wouldn't have woken up." She hated that he was right. "You were thrown into the river," he continued, gaze flicking briefly to her wrists. "I saw the marks from downstream. Silverbound. Pack work." Her jaw clenched. "So you know what I am," she said. "I know what they wanted you to be," he corrected. "Dead." Silence stretched between them. The wind whispered through the leaves overhead. "Why didn't it kill me?" she asked finally, the question tearing free before she could stop it. The rogue's eyes sharpened. He studied her more closely now, gaze lingering on her hands, her chest, the faint shimmer that pulsed just beneath her skin when the light hit right. "Because you're not what they thought you were," he said slowly. Her stomach twisted. They said I had no gift. He let out a quiet, humorless breath. Packs say that when a gift scares them. She laughed weakly. You don't know my pack. I know fear, he replied. And I know old magic. He crouched a few steps away, close enough that she could see the faint scars along his knuckles, the signs of a life lived outside pack protection. What you carry, he continued, doesn't roar or dominate. It doesn't bow to rank or strength. That's why they couldn't see it. She swallowed. Then what is it? The warmth inside her stirred at the question, flaring just enough that she gasped, clutching at her chest. Images flickered behind her eyes, roots winding through stone, water flowing backward, silver light threading broken things together. The rogue's expression shifted surprise, then something like awe. By the moon, he murmured. You're a conduit. A what? A living channel, he said quietly. For balance. For binding. For life itself. Her heart thundered painfully. That's impossible. Nothing ancient ever seems possible until it wakes up. She shook her head, overwhelmed. If that were true, the moon would have answered me. He met her gaze steadily. Or maybe the moon was waiting for you to be broken enough to listen. The words settled into her bones with unsettling weight. Before she could respond, pain exploded through her chest, sharp and sudden, knocking the breath from her lungs. She cried out, doubling over as the warmth inside her surged violently, no longer gentle. Images flooded her mind without warning. A vast stone hall. Black banners marked with silver crowns. Wolves on their knees, panic thick in the air. And at the center, a man. No, a Lycan. Towering, broad-shouldered, power coiled tight even as it unraveled. His dark hair clung damply to his forehead, his breathing ragged, his hand clenched over his heart as if trying to hold it together by force alone. A crown lay shattered at his feet. She gasped, the vision tearing away as abruptly as it came. She collapsed forward, palms pressed to the earth, shaking. Far away, thunder rolled, though the sky above her was clear. The rogue stared at her, eyes wide now. You felt him. She looked up slowly. Who? The Lycan King, he said. The one no healer can save. Her pulse pounded painfully. Why would I? Because your gift doesn't belong to packs, he cut in. It belongs to kings. To realms. To the ones holding too much power for one soul to bear. Her breath came in short, uneven pulls. I don't want this. He softened, just a fraction. No one who carries it ever does. She stared down at her hands, at the faint glow that came and went like a secret she hadn't asked for. All her life, she had been told she was empty. Useless. A burden. Now the world was telling her the opposite, and it terrified her more than the river ever had. Far to the north, beneath a different sky, a Lycan King fell to one knee as his heart faltered, the ancient magic binding his realm unraveling thread by thread. And deep in her chest, something answered the call. Whether she wanted it to or not, her fate had already begun to move. The wolf they had tried to drown was no longer just surviving. She was becoming something the world desperately needed. The Lycan King had never known weakness. His name was spoken across realms with reverence and dread, carved into stone and memory alike. He was the living embodiment of dominance, ancient blood, ancient power, bound to the throne by fate and force. His presence alone could bend alphas to their knees. His roar had ended wars before blades ever crossed. And yet now, he knelt. The great hall of Blackstone Keep was deathly silent, broken only by the harsh sound of his breathing. The torches lining the obsidian walls flickered erratically, their flames bending inward as if afraid to burn too brightly in his presence. Wolves crowded the edges of the chamber, Alphas, generals, healers, none daring to step closer. Fear hung thick in the air. The Lycan King pressed a clawed hand to his chest as pain ripped through him again. Deeper this time, sharper, as though something vital inside him was tearing apart thread by thread. His vision blurred. The bond that tied him to the land, to the throne, to the moon itself, was unraveling, and no one understood why. Again, one healer whispered desperately, "Try again." The king snarled, the sound raw and feral, but he did not rise. He could not. His strength, limitless for centuries, was draining away like blood from an open wound. "This is not an illness," he growled, voice rough with restrained fury. "I would smell it." The eldest healer bowed her head. "Then it is a curse, or a prophecy unfolding." The word echoed through the chamber. Prophecy. Long ago, before his reign, the moon's seers had spoken of a time when the Lycan King's power would grow too vast for his body to contain. When dominance alone would no longer be enough. When balance, not strength, would decide the fate of the realm. He had dismissed it. He had conquered fate as he conquered all else. Until now. Another surge of pain dropped him fully to one knee, stone cracking beneath the force of his weight. A low murmur of alarm rippled through the gathered wolves. And then, he felt it. A tug. Faint. Fragile. But unmistakable. The Lycan King froze, breath hitching as something brushed against the edges of his consciousness. It was not a threat. Not an attack. It was an answer. A resonance, distant yet deeply familiar, as if a missing piece of himself had stirred. His eyes snapped open. Silver light flared briefly in their depths. "Find her," he rasped. The chamber stilled. "Find who, my king?" a general asked carefully. The Lycan King clenched his fists, fighting the tremor that shook his massive frame. Images flickered behind his eyes, water rushing in darkness, silver rope, blood in moonlight, a heartbeat that was not his own. "A wolf," he said slowly. "Female. Cast away. Touched by the river." The healers exchanged uneasy glances. "That is very little to go on," one murmured. The Lycan King's gaze lifted, sharp and commanding despite his condition. "It is more than enough." Far away, beneath unfamiliar trees, she staggered as pain lanced through her chest again, dropping her to her knees. Her breath came in gasps, the warmth inside her surging violently, no longer content to remain quiet. She clutched at the ground, fingers digging into damp soil as the vision slammed into her mind. A massive hall of black stone. A crown shattered at a man's feet. A presence so powerful it made her bones ache. Her heart raced painfully, each beat echoing with his. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if she could drive the images away. "I don't want this." The rogue knelt beside her, his expression grim now. "You don't get to choose when fate calls," he said softly. "Only whether you answer." She glared at him through blurred vision. "You talk like this is inevitable." "Because it is," he replied. "The Lycan King is bound to the land. If he falls, everything fractures, packs, borders, balance. And your gift," he hesitated, then finished quietly, "was made to steady what is breaking." Tears burned in her eyes, hot and angry. "They tied me up. Threw me away like garbage." "And still," he said, "your heart answered his." That frightened her more than anything else. Back at Blackstone Keep, the Lycan King rose unsteadily to his feet, ignoring the protests of his council. Pain radiated through him with every movement, but the pull, her pull, grew stronger by the moment. "She is alive," he said with absolute certainty. "How can you know?" an alpha demanded. "Because if she were dead," the Lycan King replied, voice low and dangerous, "so would I be." Silence fell like a blade. Orders were given swiftly after that. Scouts dispatched to every river bordering known pack lands. Old prophecies dragged from vaults long sealed. Seers forced into trances they had sworn never to enter again. And in every whisper, in every half-remembered verse, the same phrase surfaced again and again. The drowned wolf. The castaway. The one who binds what power breaks. As the Lycan King collapsed back onto his throne, jaw clenched against another wave of agony, one truth burned clear through the haze of pain. The wolf the world had rejected was not a curse. She was the answer. And whether she came willingly or not, he would find her. She felt him before she saw him. The warmth in her chest, no longer faint, no longer gentle, flared hot and sharp as a blade, stealing her breath and driving her to a sudden halt. Her steps faltered on the forest path, fingers curling into the fabric at her sides as if she could anchor herself to the earth. There. North. The pull was undeniable now, a living thread drawn tight between her heart and something vast and dangerous beyond the trees. The Lycan King. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe as the rogue slowed beside her. They had traveled for days, skirting pack borders, moving through neutral lands where no dominance pressed against her senses. With every mile, the sensation grew stronger. An ache that was not pain, a call that was not sound. "I can't do this," she said suddenly, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "I don't belong near kings. I don't belong anywhere." The rogue studied her quietly. "You belong where you're needed." She laughed bitterly. "That's what they said when they tied me up." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The forest thinned ahead, giving way to towering black stone walls rising from the earth like the spine of a colossal beast. Blackstone Keep. Even from a distance, its presence was overwhelming, ancient, powerful, steeped in dominance that made her wolf recoil instinctively. She stopped again. "I won't kneel," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You won't have to," the rogue replied. "Not to him." She almost asked how he could be so sure, but then the gates opened. A ripple of power surged outward, rolling over the land in a wave that made her stagger. Wolves lined the path beyond the gates, alphas, guards, warriors, all stiffening as her presence hit them like an unseen force. Whispers followed her steps. "Who is she?" "She's not marked." "Why does the air feel different?" At the far end of the courtyard, surrounded by advisors and healers, stood the Lycan King. He was taller than she had imagined. Broader. Power clung to him like a living thing, coiling beneath his skin, pressing down on the world around him. Dark hair framed a face carved from hard angles and command, but it was his eyes that rooted her in place. They were not cruel. They were exhausted. As his gaze found hers, the world tilted. The pull snapped tight. Pain lanced through both of them at once. The Lycan King sucked in a sharp breath, one hand flying to his chest as he staggered forward, ignoring the frantic cries of those around him. She gasped, mirroring the motion, her knees nearly buckling as the warmth inside her surged violently. There was no doubt now. He felt her. "Clear the courtyard," he commanded hoarsely. No one argued. Wolves scattered, retreating to the edges of the space as silence fell heavy between them. She stood trembling at the entrance, every instinct screaming to flee, and yet she could not move. The Lycan King straightened slowly, each movement deliberate, painful. He took one step toward her. Then another. "Who are you?" he asked. She lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "No one," she said truthfully. "At least, that's what I was told." Something dark and dangerous flickered across his expression. "You were cast away," he said, not as a question. Her breath hitched. "You know, I felt it," he replied. His voice dropped lower, rougher. "The river. The silver. The intent." Rage rolled off him then, thick and suffocating, the air itself trembling in response. The stone beneath their feet cracked softly, hairline fractures spidering outward. "Who did this to you?" he growled. She flinched not from fear of him, but from the weight of the question. Faces rose unbidden in her mind. The Alpha. The Elders. The pack that had watched in silence. "It doesn't matter," she said quietly. "I survived." His jaw clenched. "Because you were never meant to die." The words sent a shiver through her. She took a step back, shaking her head. "I didn't come here to be saved. Or claimed. I don't belong to anyone." A murmur of surprise rippled through the watching wolves. The Lycan King studied her intently, as if seeing her for the first time beyond the pull of fate. "You think I summoned you to own you?" he asked. "I don't know what you summoned me for," she shot back, anger flaring hot and sudden. "All I know is that every time you breathe, it feels like my chest is tearing itself apart." Silence. Then, slowly, understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're resisting the bond," he said. Her laugh was sharp, almost hysterical. "I've spent my life being told I was unwanted. Forgive me if I don't leap into another cage." Something in his expression softened, not weakness, but recognition. "You are not a cure," he said firmly. "And you are not my property." The warmth inside her steadied, just a fraction. "You are the balance my power broke," he continued. "And I would rather die than force that from you." The words settled between them, heavy and sincere. She searched his face for deception and found none. For the first time since the night she was cast into the river, something inside her eased. But far away, beyond the walls of Blackstone Keep, the wind carried whispers back to the pack that had rejected her. They had felt it too. The surge of power. The shift in fate. And they knew. The wolf they had tried to drown now stood beside the Lycan King. And the world was beginning to tilt in her favor. They came at dawn. The sentries of Blackstone Keep felt them before they saw them, an unease rippling through the land, the air tightening as unfamiliar dominance brushed against the borders. Wolves gathered along the battlements, weapons ready, eyes narrowed toward the distant tree-line. She felt them too. The warmth in her chest shifted, no longer restless, but alert. Like a tide pulling back before it surged forward. She stood beside the Lycan King on the high balcony, the stone cold beneath her bare feet, the wind tugging at her hair. Below them, the courtyard stirred with movement as warriors assembled, sensing confrontation. Her pack had come. She recognized them by scent before their figures emerged from the trees, wolves she had run beside, bled beside, trusted. The Alpha walked at their head, flanked by the same elders who had watched her bound and thrown into the river. Her stomach twisted. "They shouldn't be here," she murmured. The Lycan King's gaze never left the approaching group. "They crossed my borders without summons," he said quietly. "That alone is a declaration." She swallowed. "They came for me." He turned to her then, studying her face with that same careful intensity he had shown since their first meeting. "Do you wish me to send them away?" The question surprised her. Once, the answer would have been yes, anything to avoid facing the ghosts of her past. But she had been running her whole life. First from their cruelty. Then from her own power. "No," she said after a moment. "I want to hear what they have to say." The Lycan King nodded. "Then they will speak. And they will listen." The gates opened with a low, echoing groan. Her former pack entered the courtyard hesitantly, eyes darting toward the towering walls, the armed warriors, the overwhelming presence of the Lycan King himself. Gone was their certainty. Gone was the smug righteousness with which they had condemned her. Now, fear clung to them like a second skin. The alpha stepped forward, his shoulders squared though his scent betrayed his unease. His gaze landed on her and widened. She saw it then. The shock. The disbelief. She was standing tall, unbound, unbroken, and beside the Lycan King. My king, the alpha said, dropping to one knee with stiff formality. The elders followed, more slowly, their movements creaking with age and regret. The Lycan King descended the steps, each footfall echoing like judgment. She followed, the crowd parting instinctively as they reached the center of the courtyard. Speak, the Lycan King commanded. The alpha hesitated, then lifted his head just enough to look at her. Not with disdain this time, but desperation. We felt the shift, he said. The imbalance. The surge of power. His voice cracked. We realized our mistake. A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it. You realized it when it benefited you, she said coldly. Not when you tied my wrists. Not when you watched me sink. The elders flinched. We were wrong, one of them said, bowing his head, blinded by fear. The old text's your gift, it frightened us. You didn't even bother to look, she snapped. The warmth inside her flared, pulsing outward, sending a wave of pressure through the courtyard. Several wolves staggered, forced to brace themselves. The Lycan King did not move. You cast her into a river bound with silver, he said, his voice dangerously calm. You declared her unworthy of death by blade. You left her to drown. The alpha bowed lower. We ask forgiveness. Silence fell. Every eye turned to her. For a moment, the past threatened to swallow her, the fear, the shame, the nights she had cried herself to sleep wondering what was wrong with her. She felt it all rise up, hot and choking. Then she breathed. And let it go. You don't want forgiveness, she said quietly. You want access. The alpha stiffened. You want what I carry, she continued. The gift you called a curse. The power you threw away. Her chest warmed, steady and strong now, as if in agreement. I will not return to you, she said. I will not belong to you. And I will never again let you decide my worth. The elders bowed their heads fully now, shame rolling off them in waves. What would you have of us? The alpha asked, voice barely above a whisper. She looked to the Lycan King, not for permission, but for understanding. He inclined his head slightly, offering support without control. She turned back to her former pack. You will leave, she said. And you will carry the story with you. You will tell every pack you meet what you did and what it cost you. Her gaze hardened. And if I ever hear of another wolf bound and cast aside as I was. The warmth surged. The ground beneath their feet shuddered. You will answer to me. The alpha swallowed hard. Yes. They retreated then, backs bent, dignity stripped bare. As the gates closed behind them, a hush fell over the courtyard. Wolves stared at her with something new in their eyes. Respect. Fear. The Lycan King turned to her slowly. You chose restraint, he said. Not vengeance. She exhaled shakily. I won't become what they made me. Something ancient and approving stirred in the air. Above them, the clouds parted. Moonlight spilled into the courtyard, silver and luminous, bathing her in its glow. The warmth inside her bloomed, spreading outward in a gentle wave that brushed against every living thing within the walls. The Lycan King gasped softly. Pain drained from his posture, his breathing easing as the oppressive weight that had plagued him for weeks lifted. He straightened, power settling back into him, not wild and overwhelming, but balanced. Whole. She felt it too. The bond snapped into place. Not chains. Not dominance. Connection. The moon watched. And for the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as exactly what she had always been meant to be. The wolf they had tried to drown had become something far greater, and the world would never look at rejected wolves the same way again. The world felt different after the moon chose her. Not louder, not softer, balanced. She stood at the highest balcony of Blackstone Keep as dawn spilled gold across the horizon, the wind lifting her hair like a living crown. Below her, the Lycan realm stirred. Warriors changing guard, servants lighting hearths, wolves pausing in their steps as if they sensed something profound had settled into the stones beneath their feet. For the first time in her life, she felt no urge to shrink, no instinct to hide. Behind her, heavy footsteps approached, steady now, powerful again. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. The Lycan King joined her at the railing, his presence no longer crushing, no longer unraveling the world around him. His power still burned bright, but it flowed cleanly now, like a river guided by its banks instead of tearing through them. "You stayed," he said quietly. She nodded. "I needed to see the morning." "And?" he asked. She let out a slow breath. "I think I finally belong in it." He studied her profile, the faint glow that still lingered beneath her skin when the light struck just right. "You've changed everything," he said. She turned to face him then. "No, I didn't change anything. I only stopped letting the world tell me what I was." Something like pride flickered through his eyes. Word spread quickly after that. Not through proclamations or threats, but through truth. Wolves spoke in hushed voices of the rejected Omega who stood beside the Lycan King and did not bow. Of the night the moon descended into the courtyard and chose balance over brute force. Of the way the Lycan King's suffering ended not with conquest, but with connection. Pax listened. And Pax remembered. The coronation was not what anyone expected. There was no kneeling. No forced bonds sealed in blood or dominance. The Lycan King stood before his people beneath the open sky, the moon high and full above them, and reached for her hand, not to claim, but to invite. "Will you stand with me?" he asked, his voice carrying across the gathered realm, not as possession, but as equal. She looked out at the wolves watching them, at the alphas who had ruled through fear, at the omegas who had learned to survive by silence, at the pups who would inherit whatever world they chose to build next. "Yes," she said, "but only if we change what this crown means." A murmur swept the crowd. The Lycan King smiled, slow, fierce, undeniable. "Then stand with me, Queen of the Lycans." The title settled over her like a promise rather than a burden. The moonlight surged. She felt it move through her, not overwhelming, not demanding, listening. Her gift flowed outward, threading through stone and soil, wolf and wind, binding what had long been fractured. Old laws cracked. New ones took root. From that day forward, no wolf could be cast out without trial. No gift dismissed because it did not roar. No pack allowed to bind and discard its own without consequence. The river that had nearly claimed her life was declared sacred, a place of remembrance and oath, not death. And the rejected wolves? They began to rise. In the quiet moments, when the keep settled into sleep and the moon watched from above, she sometimes returned to the river's edge. She would stand there barefoot, listening to the water that had carried her between endings and beginnings. "You saved me," she whispered once. The river flowed on, indifferent and eternal. But somewhere deep within its current, she felt the echo of an answer. "No," it seemed to say. "You saved yourself." Behind her, the Lycan King waited. Not as ruler alone, but as mate, as partner, as proof that power could exist without cruelty. The wolf they had tied and cast into the river to die had become the queen the realm could not survive without. And in every pack, In every whispered story told beneath the stars, her legend lived on. That sometimes the one the world rejects is the very one it needs most.